Chapter 9. The Ransom of Red Chief. O. Henry was an American writer whose short stories are known for wit, wordplay, and clever twist endings. He lived from 1862 to 1910 and wrote nearly 600 stories about life in America. Let's read one of his stories. It looked like a good thing, but wait till I tell you. We were down south in Alabama, Bill Discroll and myself. When the kidnapping idea struck us, it was, as Bill afterward expressed it, during a moment of temporary mental apparition. But we didn't find that out till later. There was a town down there as flat as a flannel cake called Sumit. Of course, people over there were self-satisfied, a class of peasantry as ever clustered around a maypole. Bill and me had a joint capital of about $600 and we needed just $2,000 more to pull off a fraudulent town lot scheme in western Illinois. We knew that Sumit couldn't get after us with anything stronger than constables, maybe some lackadaisical bloodhounds. We selected for our victim the only child of prominent citizen named Ebenezer Dorset. The father was respectable and tight, a mortgage fancier. The kid was a boy of 10. Bill and me figured that Ebenezer would melt down for a ransom of $2,000 to a cent. But wait till I tell you. About 2 miles from Sumit was a little mountain covered with a dense cedar brake. On the rear elevation of the mountain was a cave. There we stored provisions. One evening after sundown, we drove in a buggy past old Dorset's house. The kid was in the street, throwing rocks at a kitten on the opposite fence. "Hey, little boy," says Bill, "would you like to have a bag of candy and nice ride?" The boy catches Bill neatly in the eye with a piece of brick. "That will cost the old man an extra $500, says Bill, climbing over the wheel. That boy put up a fight like a welterweight cinnamon bear, but at last we got him down in the bottom of the buggy and drove away. We took him up to the cave and I hitched the horse in the cedar brake. After dark, I drove the buggy to the little village 3 miles away, where we had hired it, and walked back to the mountain. Bill was pasting court plaster over the scratches and bruises on his features. There was a fire burning behind the big rock at the entrance of the cave, and the boy was watching a pot of boiling coffee with two buzzard tail feathers stuck in his red hair. He points a stick at me when I come up and said, "Huh, cursed paleface, do you dare to enter the camp of Red Chief, the terror of the plains?" "He's all right now," says Bill, rolling up his trousers and examining some brushes on his shines. "We are playing Indian. We are making Buffalo Bill's show look like magic lantern views of Palestine in the town hall. I am Old Hank, the trapper, Red Chief's captive, and I am to be scalped at daybreak. By Geronimo, the kid can kick hard." Yes, sir, that boy seemed to be having the time of his life. The fun of camping out in a cave had made him forget that he was a captive himself. He immediately christened me Snake Eye, the Spy, and announced that when his braves returned from the warpath, I was to be broiled at the stake at the rising of the sun. Then we had supper, and he filled his mouth full of bacon and bread and gravy and began to walk. Very few minutes he would remember that he was a pesky redskin and pick up his stick rifle and tiptoe to the mouth of the cave to rubber for the scouts of the hated paleface. Now and then he would let out the war whoop that made old Hank, the trapper, shiver. The boy had Bill terrorized from the start. "Red Chief," says I to the kid, "would you like to go home?" "Oh, What for? Says he. I don't have any fun at home. I had to go to school. I like to camp out. You won't take me back home again, Snake Eye, will you? Not right away, says I. We'll stay here in the cave a while. All right, says he. That will be fine. I never had such fun in my life. Just at daybreak, I was awakened by a series of awful screams from Bill. They were not yells, or howls, or shouts, or whoops, or yawps, such as you did expect from a manly set of vocal organs. They were simply indecent, terrifying, humiliating screams, such as women emit when they see ghosts or caterpillars. It's an awful thing to hear a strong, desperate, fat man scream incontinently in a cave at daybreak. I jumped up to see what the matter was. Red Chief was sitting on Bill's chest, with one hand twinned in Bill's hair. In the other, he had the sharp case knife we used for slicing bacon, and he was industriously and realistically trying to take Bill's scalp, according to the sentence that had been pronounced upon him the evening before. I got the knife away from the kid and made him lie down again. But from that moment, Bill's spirit was broken. He lay down on his side of the bed, but he never closed an eye again in sleep as long as that boy was with us. I dozed off for a while, but along towards sun up, I remembered that Red Chief had said, I was to be burned at the stake at the rising of the sun. I wasn't nervous or afraid, but I sat up and lit my pipe and leaned against a rock. What are you getting up so soon for, Sam? Asked Bill. Me, says I. Oh, I got a kind of pain in my shoulder. I thought sitting up would. You are a liar, says Bill. You are afraid. You were to be burned at sunrise, and you are afraid he had do it. And he would too, if he could find a match. Ain't it awful, Sam? Do you think anybody will pay out money to get a little imp like that back home? Sure, said I, a rowdy kid like that is just the kind the parents love. Now you and the chief get up and cook breakfast. I went up on the peak of the little mountain and ran my eye over the vicinity. Over towards summit, I saw was a peaceful landscape dotted with one man plowing with a dun mule. Nobody was dragging the creek. No couriers dashed hither and yon, bringing tidings of no news to the distracted parents. Perhaps, says I to myself, it has not yet been discovered that the wolves have borne away the tender lambkin from the fold. Heaven help the wolves, says I, and I went down the mountain for breakfast. When I got to the cave, I found Bill backed up against the side of it, breathing hard, and the boy threatening to smash him with a rock half as big as a coconut. He put a red boiled potato down my back, explained Bill, and then mashed it with his foot, and I boxed his ears. Have you got a gun about you, Sam? I took the rock away from the boy and kind of patched up the argument. I will fix you, says the kid to Bill. No man ever yet struck the Red Chief, but what he got paid for it. You better beware. After breakfast, the kid takes a piece of leather with strings wrapped around it out of his pocket and goes outside the cave unwinding it. What's he up to now? Says Bill anxiously. Just then we heard a kind of war whoop such as David might have emitted when he knocked out the champion Goliath. It was a sling that Red Chief had pulled out of his pocket and he was whirling it around his head. I dodged and heard a heavy thud and a kind of sign from Bill, like a horse given out when you take his saddle off. A niggerhead rock, the size of an egg, had caught Bill just behind his left ear. He loosened himself all over and fell in the fire across the frying pan of hot water for washing the dishes. I dragged him out and poured cold water on his head for half an hour. By and by, Bill sits up and feels behind his ear and says, "Take it easy," says I. "You will come to your senses presently." "King Herod," says he, "you would not go away and leave me here alone, will you, Sam?" I went out and caught that boy and shook him until his freckles rattled. "If you don't behave," says I will take you straight home. Now, are you going to be good or not?" "I was only funning," says he sullenly. "I didn't mean to hurt old Hank. But what did he hit me for? I will behave, Snake Eye, if you won't send me home and if you will let me play the Black Scout today." "I don't know the game," says I. "That's for you and Mr. Bill to decide. He's your playmate for the day. I am going away for a while on business. Now you come in and make friends with him and say you are sorry for hurting him, or home you go at once." I made him and Bill shake hands, and then I took Bill aside and told him I was going to Poplar Cove, a little village 3 miles from the cave, and find out what I could about how the kidnapping had been regarded in Summit. Also, I thought it best to send a peremptory letter to Old Man Dorset that day, demanding the ransom and dictating how it should be paid. "You know, Sam," says Bill, "I have stood by you without batting an eye in earthquakes, fire and flood, in poker games, dynamite outrages, police raids, train robberies and cyclones. I never lost my nerve yet till we kidnapped that two-legged skyrocket of a kid. He's got me going. You won't leave me long with him, will you, Sam?" "I will be back sometime this afternoon," says I. "You must keep the boy amused and quiet till I return. And now we will write a letter to old Dorset." Bill and I got paper and pencil and worked on the letter while Red Chief, with a blanket wrapped around him, started up and down, guarding the mouth of the cave. Will begged me tearfully to make the ransom $1,500 instead of 2,000. "I ain't attempting," says he, "to decry the celebrated moral aspect of parental affection, but we were dealing with humans, and it ain't human for anybody to give up $2,000 for that 40-pound chunk of freckled wildcat. I am willing to take a chance at $1,500. You can charge the difference up to me." So the relief bill I echoed, and we collaborated a letter that ran this way: Ebenezer Dorset, "We have your boy concealed in a place far from Summit. It is useless for you or the most skillful detectives to attempt to find him. Absolutely the only terms on which you can have him restored to you are these: we demand $1,500 in large bills for his return. The money to be left at midnight tonight at the same spot and in the same box as your reply, as hereinafter described. If you agree to these terms, send your answer in writing by a solitary messenger tonight at 8:30. After crossing Owl Creek on the road to Poplar Cove, there are 3 large trees about 100 yards apart, close to the fence of the wheat field on the right-hand side. At the button of the fence post, opposite to the third tree, will be found a small pasteboard box. The messenger will place the answer in this box and return immediately to Summit. If you attempt any treachery or fail to comply with our demand as stated, you will never see your boy again. If you pay the money as demanded, he will be returned to you safe and well within 3 hours. These terms are final, and if you do not accept them, no further communication will be attempted. From two desperate men. "For heaven's sake," says Bill, Hurry back, Sam, as soon as you can. I wish we had not made the ransom more than 1,000. Say, you quite kicking me, or I will get up and warm you good. When I got back to the cave, Bill and the boy were not to be found. I explored the vicinity of the cave and risked a yodel or two, but there was no response. So I lighted my pipe and sat down on a mossy bank to await developments. In about half an hour, I heard the bushes rustle, and Bill wabbled out into the little glade in front of the cave. Behind him was the kid, stepping softly like a scout, with a broad grin on his face. Bill stopped, took off his hat, and wiped his face with a red handkerchief. The kid stopped about 8 feet behind him. Sam, says Bill, I suppose you will think I am a renegade, but I couldn't help it. I am a grown person with masculine proclivities and habits of self-defense, but there is a time when all system of self and predominance fail. The boy is gone. I have sent him home. All is off. There was martyrs in old times, goes on Bill, that suffered death rather than give up the particular graft they enjoyed. None of them ever was subjugated to such supernatural tortures as I have been. I tried to be faithful to our articles of depredation, but there came a limit. What's the trouble, Bill? I asked him. I was rode, says Bill, the 90 miles to the stockade, not bearing an inch. Then, when the settlers was rescued, I was given oats, sand, and a palatable substitute. And then, for an hour, I had to try to explain to him why there was nothing in holes, how a road can run both ways, and what makes the grass green. I tell you, Sam, a human can only stand so much. I took him by the neck of his clothes and dragged him down the mountain. On the way he kicked my legs, black and blue, from the knees down, and I have got 2 or 3 bites on my thumb and hand cauterized. But he's gone, continues Bill. Gone home. I showed him the road to Summit and kicked him about 8 feet nearer there at one kick. I am sorry we lost the ransom, but it was either that or Bill Driscoll to the madhouse. Bill is puffing and blowing, but there is a look of ineffable peace and growing content on his rose-pink features. Bill, says I, there is not any heart disease in your family, is there? No, says Bill, nothing chronic except malaria and accidents. Why? Then you might turn around, says I, and have a look behind you. Bill turns and sees the boy and loses his complexion and sits down plump on the ground and begins to pluck aimlessly at grass and little sticks. For an hour I was afraid for his mind, and then I told him that my scheme was to put the whole job through immediately and that we would get the ransom and be off with it by midnight. At 8:30 I was up in that tree, as well hidden as a tree toad, waiting for the messenger to arrive. Exactly on time, a half-grown body rides up the road on a bicycle, locates the pasteboard box at the foot of the fence post, slips a folded piece of paper into it, and pedals away back toward Summit. I waited an hour and then concluded the thing was square. I slid down the tree, got the note, slipped along the fence till I struck the woods and was back at the cave in another half an hour. I opened the note, got near the lantern and read it to Bill. It was written with a pen in a crabbed hand, and the sum and substance of it was, "Two desperate men. Gentlemen, I received your letter today by post. In regard to the ransom you have asked for the return of my son, I think you are a little high in your demands, and I hereby make you a counter proposition, which I am inclined to believe you will accept. You bring Johnny home and pay me $250 in cash, and I agree to take him off your hands. You had better come at night, for the neighbors believe he is lost, and I couldn't be responsible for what they would do to anybody they saw bringing him back. Very respectfully, Ebenezer Dorset. Get pirates of Penzance, says I, of all the impudent. But I glanced at Bill and hesitated. He had the most appealing look in his eyes I ever saw on the face of a dumb or a talking brute. Sam, says he, what's $250 after all? We have got the money. One more night of this kid will send me to a bed in Bedlam. Besides being a throat gentleman, I think Mr. Dorset is a spendthrift for making us such a liberal offer. You ain't going to let the chance go, are you? Tell the truth, Bill, says I. This little he-ewe lamb has somewhat got on my nerves too. We will take him home, pay the ransom, and make our getaway. We took him home that night. We got him to go by telling him that his father had bought a silver-mounted rifle and a pair of moccasins for him, and we were going to hunt bears the next day. It was just 12 o'clock when he knocked at Ebenezer's front door, just at the moment when I should have been abstracting the $1,500 from the box under the tree. According to the original proposition, Bill was counting out $250 into Dorset's hand. When the kid found out we are going to leave him at home, he started up a hole like a calliope and fastened himself as tight as a leech to Bill's leg. His father peeled him away gradually, like a porous plaster. How long can you hold him? Asks Bill. I am not as strong as I used to be, says old Dorset, but I think I can promise you 10 minutes. Enough, says Bill. In 10 minutes I shall cross the central, southern and middle western states and be legging it trippingly for the Canadian border. And as dark as it was, and as fat as Bill was, and as good a runner as I am, he was a good mile and a half out of Summit before I could catch up with him. Oh,